Hi everyone, this is Building Digital Literacy and Independent Learning Skills. We've talked about this a bit in every presentation thus far, but we're going to zoom in and I'm going to ask you to think about that lens as you see some familiar slides and consider some familiar ways in which to approach distance learning. Some of you have already started building that digital literacy, and I hope you see this video as a way to take it to the next level as well too, because I don't think there's any limit to what we can do to start preparing students for the possibility of distance learning. As a reminder, my name is Lana Peterson. I'm from the University of Minnesota, research practice partner with Austin Public Schools. Just an overview for what we're going to be talking about today. Again, a little bit about distance learning and then really thinking about what do students need to know. We're going to be talking about the strategy of blended learning, which is bringing distance learning into the physical classroom. We'll be talking about what does in-person practice look like and what are some intersections with effective distance learning, and then really how to build that digital literacy and those skills both for you and your students. A reminder, distance learning 2.0, we would have our whole group daily lessons via Seesaw, so kind of considering what students would need to know related to that. They have their live sessions via Teams. They would have access to an iPad to make both of these things happen, and then a more structured schedule, which requires some independent learning skills. So we talk about Seesaw. We went over kind of that daily routine, which consists of 3 big components. We would do a launch with our students, they check for feedback, and then they dive into the activities. During that launch, we would do a preview of Seesaw. Of course, when and if we started distance learning, as well as when you're practicing this in the classroom, we want to practice these 3 tasks. So you would, at the end of your morning meeting, do that overview of what will be happening in Seesaw and what you would expect students to do when they have their independent learning time, that flexible learning time. You're going to check for understanding, and then if you notice that a group is struggling, or maybe they struggled the day before with some of their independent learning times, making sure that we're offering more scaffolds to them so that they can be successful. The first thing that they're going to need to do once they find their iPad, open it up to Seesaw, they're going to check for feedback. So they're going to need to know the journal tab. They're going to need to be able to go back to their previous work, see if their teacher has sent anything back, see if they need to redo anything, or just kind of take in the feedback for the next activity. And then they're going to go to their activities tab and they're going to complete that day's work. And again, slowly scaffolding so they can do this more and more independently without your guidance, reminding them what to do and when to do it. And as they complete that new activities, they need to know whether they're seeing things that still need to be done, or if they're all caught up. And then what should they do with their time if they are all caught up? That's a great question too. Here is a big list of tools, and so really just thinking about how to break this list down a little bit more. Could you, in the next few days or weeks, create an activity that is solely for the students to get to know the Seesaw tools so that they can model for you that they know how to use the glow pen or they know how to use the eraser to create something? Could you create some activities that where you would purposefully send back their work and ask for something different? Maybe it's a puzzle or something you're doing. You're going to ask them a question. You're going to push it back to them so they understand what it looks like when they have that feedback. Again, with Meet, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but all of the different features of Meet as well. So Meet, remembering they're going to be accessing this from an iPad, so they're going to need to know how to find the app, how to navigate that, what the little icons mean along the side, and how to attend your meeting at a certain time. We're going to go deeper into this in a second. And then a structured schedule. And so imagining that they're at home and that they're going to navigate this schedule, some with the support of either a parent, a guardian, a caregiver, a big brother, big sister to help them through their day, hopefully accessing some of the live meetings that you're offering as well. So let's talk about blended learning. Blended and hybrid, these terms get used kind of interchangeably, but when I'm talking about blended learning, it's bringing the distance learning components, bringing the online learning of content into the classroom. A lot of innovative educators use the blended learning format because it provides more opportunities for differentiation. Students can work faster or slower based on what they need, and then it can, once you scaffold up and students build their independent learning skills, they can have more choice in how they complete assignments, or they can choose between assignments for you. So what does this really look like? Here's a snapshot of a classroom that's doing blended learning. I'll give you 10 seconds to kind of just observe what you see. So for me, on the far right, I see a student doing some independent activities, but they're active on the smartboard. I see a small group learning with their teacher, asking questions, getting feedback, having that active learning on the floor. I see a group, they have their headphones on and they have their iPads out, which to me, they're either playing a game or they're learning some new content. It's not a collaborative activity. And then off to the side, I see some students kind of looking at, or a student and a teacher kind of looking at some things. Maybe they're building some stuff together. And so this is the station model. It should look familiar because I've been in quite a few Austin classrooms. I know a lot of you use a station rotation model. Here are some examples. These are kind of pre-pandemic examples. A whole group start off with a mini lesson, and then we break into 3 different stations, small group where you're differentiating, checking for understanding. There's that digital learning station, maybe where students are on IXL, or maybe they're watching a flipped video from you in Seesaw. And then the 3rd station is that peer collaboration. Maybe they're building something together, playing a game, a math game or something. Again, this should look pretty familiar. Here's a different take on kind of this idea of blended learning, is that instead of station rotation, you give them this map or a menu of things that they need to complete, maybe over a week's time or 2 weeks' time. They're kind of going along the maze and they're completing it as they can. So this idea of blended learning we just quickly talked about. What would the stations look like, or what could this model look like if we were bringing in what we're going to be doing in distance learning into the physical classroom? How could we kind of mimic that and create a day where students could really practice that distance learning? First thing we want to think about is, what digital literacies will students need to know? So we really need to unpack everything related to Seesaw, Teams, and iPad. And then what other skills and routines will students need to have in order to navigate distance learning? We talked a little bit already about the schedule. And then how can we practice these in the classroom now? So let's just take that idea of joining a live class video via Teams. So, okay, they're going to have to, let's brainstorm. Start with a brainstorm with you and your team of teachers. Find the app on the iPad. Okay, they're going to open the app, then they need to log into the app, and then they have to navigate to the calendar, find that correct day, find that correct time, and then join via the right button. And all of you who are listening right now are like, whoa, 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 that's too fast, and also that's too broad. There's a lot of sub-steps in there. Here's some extra steps, and I'm sure that I've not even broken this down further. So once you brainstorm what it would take to join a live class via Teams, I want you to break it down even farther, unpack it. Okay, find the app on the iPad. First, we have to ensure that students have a charged iPad. Did they charge it the night before? Do they know where their charger is? Do they know how to turn the iPad on? Then once they open the app and they know what that Teams logo looked like, now they have to log into the app. Hopefully they're already logged in, but there's always a chance they could log out. Do they know their email and their password? And if they don't, do they have some sort of key or card that they can return to type that back in? Do they know how to type? Do they know where the @ symbol is on the iPad keyboard? Do they have a parent or a guardian that they could go to and ask for help? Once they get into the app, do they know how to get to the calendar? What clue would tell them where the calendar is? And then from there, how would you find the correct day? There's actually a button for that, but of course we want to teach them to go to today. And then from there, finding that correct time, looking at that red line, or even giving a look over your day, giving a look at what's ahead, and then joining via the right button. I think we've all learned, if we've used Teams even for our job, that there's a lot of different ways you can join a meet, and we want to stay consistent in the way that students join our meeting. And then, of course, looking at all these different things. How can we use a gradual release model to teach students how to do this? First, okay, definitely give an overview using the I Do. We could give several overviews using the I Do. And then we can move to a We Do. One example of how the We Do is happening is that there is some classes at Nevlin that are joining Teams meets across the school from each other. And the students, as a large group, are navigating teams together to join that meeting. It's a great strategy, a great way to practice. Then we do it together. So maybe we have a couple different iPads that we're asking students in small groups to join a Teams meet together, and they're learning from their peers. And then it would be a You Do It Alone, which we know we don't have enough iPads for everything, so maybe it's working with your peers to ensure that you have a class set enough iPads so that students know how to do this independently. Maybe they could test each other on how they would do that. Ask one to self-assess or to assess the other. Now we need to practice the schedule and routine, and so looking at this routine, how could we pretend that we're having a distance learning day while we're in the classroom so that students can start to get used to that independent work time, which we know can be a big thing to learn, especially for young kids. What to do when someone's not telling you every second where you need to be, how to navigate that independent learning time, how to take a break when you need to take a break, take a stretch. What do you do when you're done with your time? How will you remind yourself and keep note of when your small group instruction is or when you have gym class time. Especially this 9:30 to 11 o'clock time for this teacher in particular would be a great time to do that station rotation, practicing together every single day to have students navigate that independent work time. And then in that independent work time, understanding how to navigate through Seesaw, how to go through your daily routine, starting with that I Do and that We Do, really showing them, all right, this is what your routines are for the day. This is where you go to your activities tab. Everybody do that together. And then really releasing. And so that the students are doing it independently and that they become masters at navigating Seesaw without constant guidance from you. Next, let's talk about the iPads. iPads are new. There's a chance we'll be sending iPads home with students, and that's big. And I can tell you from the crazy laptops we get back everywhere from IJ Ellis to the high school, we have some curious students who like to take apart iPads, who might want to smash some iPads. You know, it's age appropriate, right? But we can't have that because it's very expensive. So we're going to be doing a lot of training on how to care for our iPads. I found this off the Techie Teacher. There's lots of different cutesy wootsy pictures like this to help students understand how to take care of the iPad, but keeping your hands clean, keeping liquid away from it, of course, keeping it off the floor, keeping it away from younger brothers and sisters. In addition to caring for our iPads, we need to remember to have our iPads charged. Of course, you can use the iPad while it's plugged in. It's just you're a little bit more able to move around and be mobile when it's charged up for the day, and then you don't have to worry about that. Another thing that you might want to teach some of the students is about the clock feature on an iPad, especially students who you don't think will have a lot of support in maybe getting up in the morning or attending specific meetings, and that they can set an additional alarm for themselves right on the iPad. Of course, again, they need to have the iPad charged and turned on in order for this to be effective, but it could just be another way. Or if you want them to set a quick timer for themselves for how long they need to practice a skill or how long you want them to read, this would be a strategy that you could use. So next steps. Like I quick showed you there, try to map out some of the skills and the knowledge and the routines that students will need to have during distance learning. Ideally, you're doing this with a peer or your whole team, and then you're brainstorming how could you possibly teach these different skills in a gradual release model, and then really making a plan for doing these activities right now. You never know when there might be an exposure in your classroom, something happens, and that you need to go distance learning. It might not be something where it happens the whole school. It might be individual pods of students where this is happening, and you will thank yourself for having the skills. And again, if we don't go distance learning, guess what? Then your students are just way more independent learners, and they know how to navigate Seesaw that much better. But having these digital learning skills will make distance learning easier, I promise. Thanks, everybody.